Well, let's bring in Chris Doyle, a Middle East commentator and the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. He joins us from here, live in London. Chris, thank you very much for your time. What are your thoughts on this ceasefire that was announced today? Do you think it will hold?
I think it's actually very fragile and probably not likely to hold. This last few days is a conflict that I think was brewing for some time. The tensions were really deep. I think that what has happened is essentially historic tensions between the predominantly Druze majority city of Sweida in that area and local Bedouin tribes, which had always been there, have been exacerbated by various parties and leading to killings, leading to kidnappings, to humiliation of various parties and so forth. This means that it's now going to be much harder to try to calm the situation, to bring back a sense of order. And everybody needs to pull back and rethink this. Let's be quite clear that the Druze areas have historically always been very independent-minded. They're a very proud people. And the way in which Damascus, the central authorities handle these areas is very delicate. Even Bashar al-Assad was very cautious in the way that he tried to deal with Sweida. So whilst it is understandable why the central authorities want to have a greater degree of control over this area, because it's one of the two major areas, the other being the areas under the control of the Syrian Defense Forces, predominantly, but not exclusively, Kurdish areas. It is also having to deal with communities that are fiercely independent, don't like control from central Damascus, and will resist if they feel that their interests are being breached and not taken into account. And then on top of this is the aggression from Israel that stirs it up in taking these military actions. It's an aggression. It doesn't actually even help the Druze communities whom purportedly these attacks are taking place on behalf of. They haven't been called for by such communities. And what it does actually is just further stir up the tensions and further creates more instability at the worst possible time for this area. I think what we need to see is the international community coming in here, if necessary, even sending peacekeepers to keep control, but an understanding that in this transition that we have in Syria, it's going to take some time, and it may not always be possible for the transitional authorities to impose total control until proper political arrangements come into force.
Chris, on Israel's involvement, is Israel, in your view, exploiting the unrest in Syria? Is that what we're seeing here? Why is Israel getting involved?
Exploiting, but also creating. I mean, ever since the demise of Bashar al-Assad when he fled in December, we've seen a huge uptick in Israeli attacks on Syria. Now, they were happening before, but they've been far more widespread, invasive, all across the country, taking on military targets. And then, at least since March, the Israeli leadership has said that it will intervene if Druze within Syria come under any form of threat. Now, there is no grounds that Israel, has the legal right to do this, of course. It doesn't have any legal backing for this. In doing it also, it's not been done in the sort of fashion, even if it was legally permitted, that actually helps the situation on the ground. And all it is doing the whole time is trying to really crash the very delicate transition that is just about holding Syria together. And the extraordinary thing is the way that Israeli leaders think that it might somehow be in its interest to see Syria collapse, to see these regimes, the regime in Damascus, collapse into various components, into Syria to explode into further civilian strife. In fact, I think it'll create a far bigger security headache for Israel if that were to be the case. It's much better to have a proper state in Damascus with institutions who are responsible, to whom international actors can address any concerns, than it is to have a very complex security situation with different groups fighting each other. So we need to restore order, but also underpin it with a more inclusive transition, because there are other communities who are looking at what's going on here. For example, the Kurds, those areas where the Kurds are in the majority, they're going to be far more resistant to handing over control, handing over their weapons to forces from Damascus if they continue to see scenes like this. It makes other communities much more nervous.
Chris, really appreciate your thoughts and analysis there. Chris Doyle speaking to us live there from here in London.